So I want to turn now, I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest joining us, and I'm going to guess a lot of you, because we have listeners all over America and all over the world, and this woman made history. She made the news, not just in our sweet little state of Texas, but around America and around the world, because she was the woman who stood up in Texas when we had a very repressive and long-standing shutdown. We had a shelter-in-place order in response to COVID. We had people told they couldn't leave their homes. They talked about how many people were allowed to be in certain places, which businesses could be open. And this woman named Shelley Luther owns a hair salon. She wanted to reopen when that was not allowed. And so I know you've heard most of the story. I'm going to let her tell her story a little bit. But to get to the idea, she imbibes this spirit of freedom that Katie Hopkins is talking about, and that is just bursting out in America. So without further ado, I want to invite to join us. I believe we have her on Skype, so we have her on phone, Shelley Luther. Hi, Shelley.
Hi, Debbie. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. I'm so glad you're available to join me today. So very quickly, I know really millions know your story. Very quickly, if you would tell our listeners how this all got going, that you ended up, and I should have said, my very fine friends, this is Shelley Luther, who stood up and reopened her salon. Also Shelley Luther, candidate for Texas State Senate District 30 in a race going on right this very moment. So tell us quickly your story about the shutdown and how you responded.
Well, of course, I don't know if everybody knows about the shutdown, but I refused to shut down my business, ended up going to jail and standing up to a Democrat judge. And after that, just being really active and trying to help folks out here in Texas with their businesses and really standing up against these unconstitutional orders. And a lot of people across the nation saying, you know, we really need you to run for something. You're exactly what we need in government. And lo and behold, Senate District 30, the state Senate seat opens right exactly where I live in Pilot Point. So I just went for it. And right now we've been in the campaign and early voting is going on right now.
Very quickly for our listeners, in Texas, we happen to have an open seat for, in this Texas Senate seat became open. This is to serve in Texas State Senate because the person who used to hold that seat won the Republican nomination and he'll win the seat to serve in the United States Congress because we had an opening in the congressional seat. So this seat became open, very much of a last minute shuffle. You know, these openings are rare and most people recognize in politics incumbents tend to win. So if you're going to spend a bunch of, people question the wisdom of jumping into a race with an incumbent, but you have now the incumbents out, the former person, he's in Congress. Shelley Luther is now running for that seat. So this is interesting. I know, Shelley, you got really active right after this whole shutdown in Texas and America. You reopened your salon in defiance of the governor. Did you ever second guess yourself and think, I wonder, because you did end up going to jail and you actually stood down the Texas governor to say, actually, I'm going to defy you. I'm going to stay open. Ended up having the governor have to backtrack with what I agree with you is an unconstitutional order. Did you ever kind of second guess yourself and say, was this worth it?
No, I never have, actually. And I think there's a lot of people that should be stepping up even more. It's about time that we, the people, take this back into our hands and let the government know that they work for us and they should not be telling us what to do like this.
Okay, so Shelley, tell us, there are people who say that people running for office, the Texas State Senate, everyone knows, Texas is kind of the leader of liberty. We're always telling ourselves in the country that we're the ones that stand for liberty. These are very prominent positions to be a member of the Texas State Senate or the Texas State House. So what do you say to someone who says, do you really think you're qualified? You just got in politics 3 months ago. Why do you think you're qualified to be a member of the Texas State Senate?
Well, I think there's several reasons. First of all, government was created at the beginning for normal citizens to be a part of this, not lifelong politicians, not just attorneys, not just billionaires or who you knew to get in. So I think we've really gotten away from that. We do need normal citizens back in there. I think that we need to fill the gap and get closer to, government and people, reconnect them and make sure that the people that are in government positions are making decisions for the people. Of course, I also taught high school for 13 years in public school, and that's a big part of government. And I do have a college education. I'm bilingual. And so I have a lot to offer the government. And the main thing is I want to connect with the people and make decisions based on what Senate District 30 is wishing.
I love that, and that was me my next question. I'm glad you went into it to talk about your background, because I think there has been, and you're exactly right. From the founding of America, the idea was this is we the people. We are the government. So we the people choose our elected officials, and they make laws, and we get to change them out if we don't like the laws they make. And over the centuries, it has become just kind of a lore that in order to be qualified to run, certainly for federal office, for Congress or Senate, but even the state, you probably should be a lawyer, you should probably have a long background in government, you probably should have served on city council first. All these kind of stepping stone assumptions that have no premise in the law, no basis in the law, but they really began to be kind of, in my view, they were kind of an incumbency protection thought, and they were also kind of a establishment's going to rule, and you people are just going to let us be ruled. So you have to know that the grassroots in Texas are just so excited to hear someone step up and say, I can do this. As you said, you've been a high school English teacher, you've been a business owner, you've made a business thrive and grow, and you're one of the we the people wanting to stand up. So tell us about the crowds, like when you're going around. I see the crowds, and it's fun to watch, but tell us about the reception from the grassroots as you do your campaign.
It's actually overwhelming that they have received me and welcomed me into their kind of club in Texas, and it's a very prestigious place to be in amongst the grassroots, because they are Texas. They are the backbone of Texas. They are what people, when you think of Texas, that's who they are. And we are the well-mannered, take our hats off for the national anthem, wave at people when you see them, opening doors type of Texas. And we are the part of Texas that we don't want that to go away. What you see in Austin and Dallas right now, that is not what you know grassroots for. So I want to protect that in SD 30, and I'll do everything I can to protect that.
I love that answer, and I will tell you what's really interesting about Texas, the reputation. I mean, I grew up in New York. Don't tell anybody, but I grew up in New York. So we've been in Texas 20 years. We love it here, love it here. But there is something as I become more and more involved in politics, even though the spirit of Texas is exactly what you say, the picture of Texas is kind of grassroots, loving, good, hardworking, honest people. Just the kind of the heartland American values here. But it is true in Texas, as in every place, there can develop a sense of an establishment, kind of a, we've been elected, we don't have term limits, so you can stay in the House and Senate pretty long, you can be governor for a long time. And so even if it was not intentional and even if it's inconsistent with conservative ideas, you tend to develop a kind of a ruling class elitism that says, we're the ruling class in Austin, we're the club, we're the leaders, and we'll kind of get involved and figure out who else is allowed to join our club. So you do understand you're a bit of considered an outsider within the Austin establishment. Is that okay with you?
You know what? I figure that's my biggest asset, honestly. I don't want to be part of the inside of Austin. I don't want to be considered part of that club. I want to be considered part of the people. And I think that more people, hopefully, if I get into the Senate, the state Senate, I hope more people will join me in this fight to break through and make the government more part of the people.
And more responsive to the people. I'll tell you in particular, I don't want to go way down the path of COVID and restrictions in Texas, because I spend a lot of time on this show talking about coronavirus regulations. But in Texas, I noticed it's actually one of the things your campaign decided to make a front and center point, that there is a need to question, to rethink, and maybe change the status quo about what kind of orders, who has authority to shut down the state kind of indefinitely. What authority is that? Should we have a change to Emergency Powers Act? So what are your thoughts about that? Why the whole coronavirus thing upset a lot of people in Texas, because we're still under restrictions here. Not as bad as Michigan, but not like it should be. So what is your sense of it? What do you do with that? If you were to be a member of the Senate, what kind of changes should we be making there?
Honestly, the government doesn't have any standing. There is no law that gives them any, they have zero rights actually to close Texas at all. We actually should depend on ourselves for personal responsibility. And right now, Governor Abbott is using this 1975 Disaster Act, but that's for like tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that. And it's a stretch, I'm telling you. So if I were to get into the Texas State Senate, the first thing I would do is make amendments to that or restrictions to make sure that our standing governor or future governors could never use that again to shut down the state of Texas, especially without having a meeting with with the legislatures, a special session at least. That's minimum. But right now, there is no law saying that the government can shut down Texas.
You are exactly right. There is no law saying they can shut it down. And actually, what I've heard people talking about, I'll just float this idea, is even if someone were to say, well, the governor, there may be some extreme circumstance where it's not a flood, but something else, he's got to have temporary power. There's got to be something that says, it's a temporary, limited in time, and eventually there has to be some ability, some avenue available for citizen recourse to say, okay, prove why we still have to live under this. There's part of what is so frustrating is to Texans, there's no authority for Texans to challenge this. I know there are lawsuits against the governor right now. He's being sued, but there's no clear legislative authority provided to say to the citizens, here's how you fight back. And that there needs to be actually an adversarial hearing where you present why we should be open and let the government justify why they're trying to close us. What do you think about that idea?
I definitely think so because, I've actually sued the governor, and that was back in May, and I'm just now talking about it to a judge today. So right now, how many businesses have already closed? How many people have already committed suicide? How much abuse has already happened? How much depression has already been caused? How much money has already been lost? So you're right, we have not been able to do anything in a timely manner. And we still just now, a few days ago, got another disaster declaration put on us for what? No one has proven any data. And they're throwing numbers on us that we keep continuing to prove that are dishonest. They're not right. So what I say to this is personal responsibility. And at some point, Texas needs to stand up and say, you know what? This is our state. We're going to do what we feel is right.
Shelley Luther, you embody the spirit of Texas. You just make me smile listening to you. And I really think there are many more people, a lot of people sitting home, kind of frustrated. They either already lost their business, they had to give up, they had to close it down. They've lost homes, they've lost their apartments, they've lost their financial well-being, they're spending their savings to get through. And people just looking for someone to say, where's the government? Why do they have the authority to do this to us? And so I think you really embody that spirit of saying, no, actually they don't, and we're going to stand up and fight. I love that you're saying that.
Thank you. I mean, the government is not there to protect us. They're there to protect our rights. And so I just have a big problem with them saying that they're going to try to protect us from something. That's not what they're there for. And actually, the Constitution is there to protect us from them. And so definitely things have reversed. Everything's backward right now. So we need to get more people that are regular, normal citizens back into the government and get them back in check.
Absolutely. Shelley Luther, I am so glad you're running for state senate. Tell us, if you could, tell us your website people can go to support you.
Sure. It's shelleyluther.org, SHELLEY. And anybody could go on there. They can volunteer. They can make calls for us. Right now, we are doing early voting in Senate District 30, and the last day is Election Day on September 29th.
I meant to go over that at the beginning. I'm sorry I didn't be really clear to our listeners. This is a special election in Texas. This is not tied to the November 3rd election. It's a special election because the seat became open. So early voting is right now. It was a date picked in September, toward the end of September, where the actual decision, the final voting is. And so it's happening right now. It kind of snuck up on people, actually. I think a lot of people weren't aware that this was all happening right now. I also want to commend, though, Shelley, in addition to your website, which I know is great, your Facebook presence is pretty great. So what's the name of your Facebook?
It's just my name, Shelley Luther. So you can keep up with where we're going to be. And we're in probably like 5 different places a day. We're trying to meet as many people as we can. Governor Abbott only gave us about 30 days for our campaign, and we're making the most of it.
You most certainly are. I happen to know the people helping you. They're fabulous. They are on fire. I love it. Shelley Luther, thank you so much for taking time and joining me today.
Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for having me.
Loved it, loved it. Okay, folks, I gotta tell you, Shelley Luther, this is what we need in this country, is more people like Shelley Luther, saying, you know what, I'm seeing things that aren't right, and I'm actually allowed to run for office. I think there has, over time, as I mentioned talking to her, built up this sense that somehow, to run for office, you have to have some credentials showing you held lower offices, and at first you were on the school board, and then you were on city council, and then you were here, then you were there, and there's no law. And there's no reasonable expectation about that. In fact, one of the criticisms I've heard people make of that particular candidate is, well, the other candidate running as a Republican, he actually is he's been in the Texas House before, he knows the layout of the Capitol, he knows how to find the men's room, he knows how the committee process works. Well, those are all arguments that perpetuate the incumbent forever. These are arguments that the Incumbency Protection Act thinking is all about, that says somehow if you're incumbent that you're just better than someone who's challenging you. And I had an entire legislature full of brand new people, if you had the whole Senate and the whole House full of brand new people, no incumbents, brand new, they would figure it out. They'd figure out what to do. But we need to have this fresh blood, fresh energy in the state of Texas. I'm just very enthused about this campaign, as you can really tell. Enthused really also about someone willing to stand up and take a risk, as she did, face an went to jail overnight, or maybe 2 nights, because she would not close down her hair salon, because she, as she said, she had employees who needed to get a paycheck to put food on the table for their children. This whole COVID era has helped America wake up to the question, and that the idea that we all should be questioning, thinking through, what does the government have power to do? What is their role? What's their right role? And what do they not have authority to do? And I didn't really follow up with her when she mentioned it, but we talked about it in the show quite a bit, and I want to underscore it again before I turn to my next topic. The government does not have the job. Not just doesn't have the responsibility, they don't have the right to legislate just to keep you safe. If they did, they would outlaw motorcycles, car racing. They have to outlaw NASCAR. They have to outlaw jumping out of airplanes with a parachute. They have to outlaw motorcycle races. They'd have to outlaw a bunch of things that obviously carry some risk. The government doesn't have the job of outlawing everything that they view as risky. They do have a responsibility to keep citizens informed. And once they have done that, the idea that they can keep an economy, a people shut down, as we have throughout our country at various stages, depending on what state you're in, to keep you safe, is not the right role of government. And it's not just the question, it's a different question whether you should stay home if you have pre-existing conditions or a lot of fear or age or whatever other reason you have. No one is saying you have to go out. But to have our society shift from a country rooted in freedom, premised in freedom, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to a country waiting to be told by your local government whether you're allowed to go to the grocery store today, what time, and how far away you have to stand from your fellow citizens. This is outside the role of the government. This is not what we paid government to do, and even though you can think they're just trying to help, they're just trying to keep us safe, this is the premise for the surrendering of liberty. Surrender your liberty. Don't worry. The government's trying to keep you safe. They're just trying to help. We cannot have that in this country and still hold on to the precious idea, the founding idea of America, that we have as individuals, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.